Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with a Breena the Demagogue list. For those who don't know, Breena is my favorite commander, and therefore I'm always excited to see a Breena list come my way, especially those that have different goals or different ideas, and we definitely have some differences here right away. This deck comes to us from Raccoon Walker, who says that they're looking to improve this deck, but kind of keep it at its same power level, keep it around the same tone. We're thinking about generally a deck that benefits from our opponent's action. So this is kind of a defensive politics deck, right? For those who haven't watched my Breena deck, like I made a video that going over it, or if you haven't watched it get played on like Mutz's channel, I am very much so on the aggro plan with Breena. This is how I tend to build these political commanders. If you see me play Miss Bumbleflower, it's kind of the same thing, where I just see +1/+1 counters and draw, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna smash face. But traditionally, Breena has been built in more of a politics, group hug, that kind of defensive kind of deck that we see in white X decks. And I think this is a really good example of that. Now, I didn't want to go too much off of how the deck is, because it's too easy when you already, like, when you have the deck, it's too easy to just say, oh, just play my version. I don't want to do that. And I want to kind of keep it at the power level it's at, which means after, we're going to look at the commander, but we're also going to talk about brackets a little bit, conceptually, not too much. I got some feedback that people do like it when I talk about more conceptual things, so I will take advantage of that because that's my favorite stuff. But after that, we'll talk about the deck structure and a few additions that we have. All right, long enough intro, let's get right into it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. I've done it a million times, but I'll do it a million more. Who is Breena the Demagogue? My favorite bird warlock. She is a 1/3 flying for 1 white and a black. That's Orzhov colors, and she has one very, very important and slightly confusing ability. Whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, if that opponent doesn't have the lowest health among your opponents, the attacking player gets to draw a card, and you, the owner of Breena, gets to put 2 +1/+1 counters on control. Now, if you are also the attacking player, you get all of the effect. But when your opponent is the attacking player, you just get the +1/+1 count. I don't want to like go into how good this is, because once again, if you want to really deep dive into Breena and like why I think she's good, I'll put the link to the other video down below where you can see, and I'll explain all of the ways you can use it. But generally, the way you want to think about it is on your turns, you're going to probably trigger this twice. Because you have 2 opponents that have more life than 1 opponent, and then usually your opponents, if they choose to trigger it, will trigger it once on their turn. This can mean in turn cycles that you've drawn 2 cards and put upwards of like, I don't know, 8 ideally, or 6 to 8 +1/+1 counters on your creatures, which can make a huge, huge difference and create this either like one very large creature, it could be Breena that you could be attacking with, or a number of smaller creatures that are just bigger than they should be, you know, where you have a bunch of 4/4s instead of 2/2s and the like. Now, before we go into the deck list itself, I do want to talk about the brackets. So the brackets are kind of an interesting aspect of what Commander has become. And I know my face, I'm looking over, my face is covering bracket 1, but we don't believe in bracket 1, so I don't think this is too much of a problem, right? So the brackets fundamentally are kind of this loose idea of identifying where your deck belongs so that you could have appropriate gameplay at appropriate levels of interaction between each other. The difference between like bracket 2 and bracket 4 is really, really big, but the difference between bracket 2 and 3 and 3 and 4 is small, right? So good bracket 3 decks can fight bracket 4 decks, etc., etc. Now, even with that in mind, I do want to say that this, can't really point, these areas, 1 and 2 are really hard for me to build. And if you play a lot of Magic and you do your own deck building and you like watch and follow things, bracket 1 and 2 slowly do kind of become less and less accessible. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that the deck list itself that we're looking at is bracket 2. If we go over here, bracket info has all this information, and it is fundamentally true. I've looked through it. We've got no 2-card combos that I've seen at least, and you never know. And the deck itself is not playing any game changers. We don't have any tutors that I've seen. So we're in this position that, like, this is very cleanly a bracket 2 deck. However, if you brought this deck and said, hey Curse, this is my bracket 2 Breena deck, I might say this is a bracket 3 deck. Like, it's pretty close. We don't have the 3 game changers. So the only difference I would say is that it's playing 0 game changers. However, I do think this deck could tango with bracket 3 pretty easily. So, I mean, all of this I'm saying is just kind of like to conceptualize it so we can talk about it. I think this system isn't really good, and that's also okay. I think it's not meant to be all-encompassing. This is supposed to be loose and help people. I think if you play like with me or my power level or like my interest in Commander, you know, and you say, hey, Cursed, what bracket is that deck you're playing? What I'll do is I'll tell you what the deck does. I'll tell you, like, I'll give you a list if you want, and I will go, I'm like, hey, this is how it wins, this is its goals, this is how it leverages its strong cards, this is how to stop it, this is all the information, are you interested? That's just because, like, at this level, I just really do want to have fun, and I want to, you know, transparent about what I do. This came up in a comment where, like, this concept here I wanted to say, which I think is the example I want to use about the problems with the brackets, is late game 2-card infinite combo. And the discussion between me and anyone else, I think, of late game could like vary wildly, right? I remember reading on Reddit recently where someone was salty that games were ending around turn 6 and they didn't get to play their Thrag Tusks, which I'm happy that they have groups to play that with. That's probably bracket level 2. But to me, turn 6 is absolutely late game. We've established our threats, we've established our engines, you know, people are preparing to start going into like their combos. They're preparing to drop really big creatures to win the game around that time. So to me, I would go, yeah, you know, turn 6, late game, a 2-card infinite combo makes sense to me. But that person I was talking about online, I think hates that idea. So like, I find the brackets just like, they're vague enough to work, but fall to scrutiny. I think that's good. I really recommend that if you're going to be using brackets as a way to talk with your friends and your, you know, people you might play at LGSs, just have the full conversation. Talk about your deck. Have your deck list. Like, be good, right? Like, give the whole answer. Don't let them like, don't give them incomplete information because they might not have fun, and then you don't get to play with them again. All right, looking at the deck list itself, let's see. So I want to start with what we always start with. I'm really trying to make sure this is something we do every time because I want to instill in you, the viewer, to do this with your decks. And that's, we're going to look at the land, we're going to look at the color base, we're going to look at the curve, and we're going to look at the mana rods. These are pillars of Commander and of Commander deck building, and I also find this is almost 100% of the time the weakest part in most people's deck. Like, here's the funny thing. I'm going to say it here. If you go and look at my Breena deck, there's definitely structural issues, especially with the mana base, because frankly, I don't update it very much. And if I had the means to take my fetch lands out of Modern, the deck would be have a lot better mana base. So like, I am not immune to this. This is a regular thing to do. It's like the hardest part of Magic, especially because we've been taught, basically, we've been taught in all of this time that Commander product has come out, that the most important thing of Commander is new cards. The newest cards, the newest sets, the newest Commander-only cards, that these are the things we should be paying attention to, when fundamentally the structure of our decks is where all of the issues really are. If you want me to talk more about that, please let me know. I do kind of want to talk about that, but I do want to do this video first, so let me know if you're interested. All right, so looking at this deck list itself, we've got 35 lands. 35 lands and no MDFCs, which is pretty low. Especially with no MDFCs, I'd like this to be at least 37. We do have 6-drop, a 6-drop that we want to cast one day, and we have no reanimation or cheating them into play. We don't have a lot of treasure generation, if at all. No, we have a little, but not a lot. So generally, I'm thinking that I would like to at least hit 37 for lands. We draw a lot of cards, but if we are off lands and off engine, because Breena is off the battlefield, we are in a situation that we're going to be wanting 1 or 2 more lands in the deck. If we were to put an MDFC, I think I would be content with like 36 lands and 1 MDFC. So that's not too bad. Looking at our color distribution, we can see we've got 74% of the deck is white, 23% is black, and we got 57 in white, 51 in black. So easily, I think we're overdoing it on black and underdoing it on white. But as we can kind of see really readily, a lot of this is because of the 29 basics that we have in our deck. We have 6 non-basic cards, lands that like tap for both colors, and we definitely should be doing more. I think I am going to go over a few, like, it's going to be in the additions that I'm briefly going to talk about it again, just to get it in there. But recently I've just been thinking about the use of certain kind of, I'm going to say slow fetches or weaker fetches that we don't see that much anymore because I think we've just deemed them to be bad. I'm thinking Ash Barrens, but if you were to say like, you know, the new Capenna lands or Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, I think those are all playable cards at this point in the game. I do understand fundamentally that like having like cards come in tap, these slow fetches, is not fun and not great, but if that's going to fix our mana problems on a budget, I do think it's really, really valuable. I will say that like considering if we were just to put in, right, like the Esper, Capenna land, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Ash Barrens, just basically just those, let's just say. That's 4 basics we can take out. We could probably take those almost completely out of swamps, like 3 swamps, 1 plains, and our land base is already going to be better, right? And if we were to go further and further on this, we would be happier and happier. So we do want to pay attention to this, especially considering how much of the deck is white. And we can see especially around that middle 4 mana, we've got Archangel of Tides that needs a lot, but throughout the latter half, 2 white symbols come up a lot. So wanting to have those 2 white as soon as possible and consistently is rather important. And we don't have that many double blacks. We've got Court of Ambition, and we have down here Gaunty Knight Minister as our only 2 black pip cards, which is still something to be considered. I've said this before, and I think it's really important sometimes that decks do not have to be even in colors, and often having more in one color than the other really helps deck building and deck cohesion. So accepting the fact that this deck is just, you know, the majority of it is just white is possibly something that can help you get better, or like build it better and make stronger decisions. Okay, last thing before we go into some of the cards themselves is the artifacts, and I'm talking about the Mana Rock. Almost every artifact we have is a Mana Rock, with the exception of Swiftfoot Boots, and to an extent Pearl Medallion, but we'll get to that after the Mana Rocks. So we are running what we said, 6 Mana Rocks. Now, if you're going to immediately take 2 to 3 of them and make them into lands, I'm already going to be way, way happier. So that would be the easiest fix here. But I do want to talk about the fact that I don't think you need to be playing this many Mana Rocks. I think this deck functions very well of curving out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like that. And if you need to be curving out with Mana Rocks because you're not hitting your lands, that's going to slow you down. If you are hitting your lands, are you really going to be wanting to play Mana Rocks? And I would say probably not. You'd much rather be casting, you know, you really want to cast a 1-drop creature into a 2-drop creature, which we'll get back to. And then you want to be casting some of your really strong 4-mana spells, and then finally your 5-mana spells. Like, there's not really a zone where you want to be casting the 2-drops. I know it's been said before that sometimes you're going to be like, I'm going to hold up removal and I have nothing else to do, so I might as well play Mana Rock. But, I mean, in that situation, I think you just rather play one of your 2-drops with that, right? play like Hold Up, Path to Exile, and play Bounty Agent, for example. It can be a really strong, like when you have 3 mana available play, right? And so with that in mind, the rocks do feel like they're really not doing much for you, and they're here due to, you know, that sentiment of creating decks from checklists, you know. So if I had my way, I would cut down completely mana rocks to Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, and then if you wanted, after cutting all of those, to put other artifacts in, that could be interesting. Well, Pearl Medallion is important to consider. This is one of those decks that I do think Pearl Medallion does a decent job, but not the greatest job. Remember, the idea of Pearl Medallions and the Medallions is not only do you want the majority of your deck to be that color, which I will concur that, like, I will agree that this is a good place for that, but it's also, you need to be double spelling, because if you're not casting 2 spells a turn, it's just a mana rock that taps for colorless on your white spells, which is a horrible deal. So you need to make sure you're going to cast multiple spells a turn that are affected by Pearl Medallion. And I would argue that a lot of the spells that you're going to cast, you know, like multiple of, I'm looking at your removal, I'm looking at your sorceries, not even most of your sorceries, like Night's Whisper, the first few instants, up to like the 3 mana instance. These are cards you're probably going to be double spelling with, and the majority of them will not receive the reduction because they do not either have a colorless mana source or a colorless pip, but they also are not white. Like Night's Whisper, you can't get that going, or D-Spark has no pips. Like, there's only so many zones that you could be benefiting from this. So for me, it's pretty close, but I think I would cleanly get rid of the Pearl Medallion. Swiftfoot Boots, I don't really think it needs to be here. If we wanted to be using the boots, like, I understand Lightning Greaves doesn't work in theory because the Shroud stops you from putting counters on whatever you give it to with Breena. However, I would just say that Lightning Greaves is just better, right? That Equip 0 is just going to be much stronger than the Equip 1, especially on a deck that's so tight in mana. So it makes me think, okay, you play Breena, you'd rather equip the Lightning Greaves and go, you know what, it's rough, but I just won't put crit counters on Breena. And I think you'll be happy with that deal. Like, I think it'll be just much more effective in the long run. But even with that said, I don't think this is what I want to do. I know Lightning Greaves can be pretty good late game after a board clear where you can play something and attack with it, but we're not the kind of deck that has really strong big creatures that we're happy to haste out after a board clear, right? A lot of our creatures are just decently sized, except for our 6-drop is the only, I believe, the biggest creature by far in the entire deck. So both Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots don't feel particularly interesting, and Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves don't get cast on curve very well, because like I said before, you want to go into 1-drop, 2-drop to maximize your Breena turn where you attack with 2 creatures and you get to use her ability to. Okay, let's quickly look around the rest of the deck for some changes and a few cards that catch my eye. Starting with the instance, I feel like Bovine Intervention is probably just a little too cute. I think I would rather, like, since we're already playing both Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight, I feel like we've got enough removal that hits any target. Like, actually, I don't even need to say that. Anguish Unmaking, Vindicate, D-Spark. We've got so many cards that are just like, point at a thing, it's gone now, that we should start being a little critical of the ones that we're adding at the end of the list. And Bovine Intervention definitely feels like on the end of the list. Whoops. Don't get me wrong, it is interesting. A 2/2 Ox is definitely better than a 3/3 Elephant. However, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. So if I had to cut one, it would be this one. But if you didn't, I would maybe recommend cutting another. Vindicate is pretty close. I love Vindicate, but if you are not at a power level or bracket level, which this deck isn't, where you're comfortable destroying your opponent's lands, Vindicate is not as good. Vindicate is meant to be used against land. Like, that's that it blows up lands. The other ones will do everything this does, but better. So you have to have a pretty good reason to be running. Looking at the rest of the instance, I do like this collection. Flare of Fortitude, I'm not entirely sure, just because I haven't played with it in Commander. I think it would be good. I'm not sure. If someone has experience, please comment below and tell me your best Flare Fortitude moment, your most hashtagable Flare Fortitude moment. Because don't get me wrong, I can see how these are blowouts. Like, this is very reminiscent of Ink Shield and those other effects, but I don't know how effective that is. Looking at the sorceries, I generally like them. I wouldn't mind one more draw spell. I think I did suggest one, so just something else, because I feel like we're a little low on unconditional draw. And then our board clears feel a little high mana, which is perfectly normal at this power level. At this power level, people love things like Merciless Eviction, people love Farewell, people love things like Damning Verdict, where they're like, oh, this is going to be awesome. This is going to stop, you know, I'm going to keep a bunch of creatures and I'm going to destroy all my opponent's creatures. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen due to the nature of players liking +1/+1 counters, but I mean, most of the time it'll be pretty effective. That being said, it is in my nature to want the most effective option at the lowest mana cost. And considering our deck builder is playing Swords to Plowshares and Path of Exile, I would argue that they probably feel similarly. To which I would say I would rather play Dam, which is the black spell that overloads into Wrath of God in white, or just Wrath of God or Day of Judgment. Because I really do think going down to 4 mana over 5 is going to be much more important. And then having that kind of, you know, the loss of losing your board is secondary to the fact that, you know, the game gets to continue and doesn't miss certain things, or you can cast a 2-drop after, anything like that. That's generally my opinion, but I don't think it's too much of a... Going into creatures, I do once again like a lot of this. I do have some additions to it, but I do like almost every card here. Like the deck itself is very, very strong and built in a very fun way. Like, I'm very impressed by it. That being said, I don't mean this about... I might be impressed because I like playing this deck and I like these cards. So it doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means that, like, I'm having fun reading these. And I do think this is a good deck, so don't take that the wrong way. Ornithopter of Paradise sticks out as being particularly weak here because until we can put counters on it, it can't attack, which means it's one of the weakest turn 2 plays, because we do want to go 1, 2, 3 with Breena, getting those 2 attacks in, and losing a card draw and 2 extra counters because our 2-drop taps for mana instead of attacking is pretty bad. I will say, if you're thinking, well, cursed, then just don't play it on turn 2. Then I would say, then why play it at all, right? Like, what are you casting this on turn 4? You're casting this on turn 5 to be like as a mana rock? That's awful. You have much better spells to cast, so this just stands out as being particularly weak. Looking through the rest, I think we are going into the zone where things are starting to get a little... I'm going to get a little critical about them. Exemplar of Light is really, really cool, but I think is probably a little too much work for what it does. Keen Duelist, this is not. They fundamentally work really, really similarly, but you pay double for this for an effect that, you know, you're basically skipping the gain life portion, because you're just going to use the +1/+1 counter portion of this. And so you just have a 2 mana more expensive Keen Duelist with flying instead of vigilance. I believe she is. Let me double check that. Oh, there it is. I said Keen Duelist. I'm so sorry. I meant Dusk Legion Duelist. Yeah, so Dusk Legion Duelist has vigilance, so we're paying 2 more to turn that into flying. Is that worth it? I would say probably not. Compared to all of your other 4 mana cards, this one is probably the weakest. Whereas a lot of the other 4 mana cards, like, drop and do something immediately. Like, comparing them to Drana and Livala, it's like no contest. This card is so much better dramatically, and you don't need to support it with Breena. They're just so powerful. So the difference in these kind of things, I think, is meaningful. Likewise, Firemane Commando feels just a little too cute. It feels like Breena at home, and I don't mean that in a compliment. I do understand how this is the kind of card that at lower bracket levels and lower power levels gets triggered a lot by your opponents. But once again, if we wanted that, we have Breena. So we're playing this with Breena out. I think this is just going to paint a giant target onto us because now we're drawing so many cards a turn in our opponent's turns. And I don't know. Oh, right. Sorry. I'm mistaking the second ability as us drawing. Yeah, no. So this only triggers. So this is just comparable to, where is it? Mangara, I think. Because Mangara is just way, way stronger and works in opposite. And I guess maybe that's the idea, right? You don't want to have both Mangara and this angel on the battlefield because their two attacking triggers kind of conflict with each other. Because Mangara wants you to, it gives you cards when you're attacked, and the angel gives cards when to that player when others are attacked. They're super incentivized not to attack you, which you might think, well, that's the point of these cards, Cursed. Why would we? No, you do want to draw the card. Mangara is there to draw you cards. Mangara shouldn't be there to kind of convince your opponents not to draw you cards. You want them to draw you cards. So when you are effectively shutting down this, one of the two things that makes Mangara powerful, you're putting yourself in a situation of like, why did you cast Mangara, or why did you cast the angel if you're going to? So for me, I think a Firemain Commando is an easy cut. Barb Servitor as well feels like it just does not belong in this deck. I understand how this can be really strong, but this is not this deck, right? Like it is effectively going to be chump blocked by like 2/2s. And that makes this like a 4/1 indestructible, and that's not great. And I don't know, I don't particularly see this as being powerful, even if we put counters on it. That is something that's important, is that this card doesn't grow in power as we grow its power, unlike other forms of stuffy dolls. So we get stuck in this kind of situation where we're just growing a strategy that kind of has nothing to do with our strategy. And because we're out of red, we can't bolt it, we can't blasphemous act it ourselves. So we're not really getting the full benefit from it. I guess if you put enough counters on it, it is like a 6/6 indestructible. But if you really wanted that effect, there's a lot of better targets are doing that. So I'm not particularly impressed there by that card. This is a little thing, but I do feel like we are playing a lot of ghostly prison effects. Just going through it, we've got the, where's our 3 white? We've got the Archangel of Tides, we've got the Archon of Absolution, we've got Baird, we've got Neil, is that actually pronounced that? Not sure. We've got the Ghostly Prison itself. Like this is a lot. This might be too much for. I don't think at this point. Oh yeah, and there it is, Windborn Muse. That was the one I was missing. So we've got, yeah, okay. So we've got so many versions of this effect that I really think they're not stacking in an effective way. Like, we're getting into a situation where our opponents are just going to sandbag removal and, you know, board wipe all of the creatures that stop it. And then, like, enchantment destroy our ghostly prison and we're back to, right? There's this idea, this is kind of philosophy, I guess. If you build a wall and nobody attacks you, you have wasted the effort in building a wall. But if you build a wall and someone attacks you, or goes to attack you and is deterred by the presence of the wall, then it was effort well spent. Now, if you're going to get attacked and you build 2 walls and those 2 walls are necessary, great. But if you build 2 walls and only 1 wall was necessary, you see where I'm going with this? Like, you start wasting your energy, and in a game of Magic, this is mana and this is opportunity cost of casting the spells, because Windborn Muse is not a good attacker. Even with Breena counters making her a 4/5, you're not particularly interested in attacking Windborn Muse all the time. She's kind of you don't even want to put counters on her. She's very, very defensive, right? So after the first, I would say after the first Ghostly Prison effect, you're generally safe. The second Ghostly Prison effect, you can't be touched. Then the third, what are you doing? Calm down. You don't need that much protection, right? If someone is willing to pay 4 mana to attack you with 1 creature, they're willing to pay 6 mana to attack you with 1 creature. So there won't be any fundamental difference. And if they couldn't pay 4, they can't pay 6. So it goes both ways. I would probably say both the Archangel of Tides and the Archon of Absolution are probably the weakest ones of the group, and that is where I would start cutting. I don't like Baird, but sure. There it is. There it is. Okay. I think that's generally it. I want to go into my additions. Is there anything else I'm seeing? No, this is good. All right, let's go into additions. Okay, so this is, I said I'd come back to this. This is fundamentally, I think, a place you could get a lot of extra leverage in your mana base. And this is something I really want to recommend to anyone who's watching. Just play more of these cards. I understand that bounce lands, they kind of get that feeling because we've seen them in precons for so many years, and people get that feeling of like, oh, they're bad. So long. You play, it comes in tapped, you lose a land, if it gets destroyed. Like I get those feelings. But what people do not talk about fundamentally is how bounce lands let you curve out really, really nicely. If you haven't gotten to play with them in like a limited environment, so like draft or something, you may not know this, but so a basic swamp and Orzhov Basilica in your hand, or any bounce land, right, is 3 turns of land draw, which is really important when you think about it, because curving out in limited is really important, but it's important everywhere else. So having the means of using a card to help you curve out means that with 2 lands in your hand, you have upwards of 3 turns to draw a 3rd land, right? Because you go swamp, do whatever, you play the Basilica, goes back into your hand, you untap, then you play the swamp, right? If you've drawn a land at any point in that, you're getting to 4 mana really easily, and you're pretty happy. It does cut you off on turn 2 plays, but sometimes the situation is that you have to do that. Obviously, it's helped out by the fact that if you have multiple turn 1 play, like 1 mana plays or things like that, it gets better. Still important to know. If we scroll down, we even have ones that, you know, people might think are weaker, but I still think are really strong. Concealed Courtyard, Silent Clearing, and Bright and the Pathways are all decent cards. Fetid Heath, not as your first land, but as your second land, is strong. And I believe these cards aren't too expensive. Yes, this being $1 is really, really nice. Then we go into things that are generally tap lands or tap lands with an additional ability, which I think all of which are playable. Bleachbone Verge, I think, doesn't work as well because it doesn't tap for white naturally, it taps for black naturally, which is a little weaker in this deck, but that being said, it's still very doable. Moving into Restless Fortress, Shambling Vent, these can be really good in these kind of decks, etc, etc, etc. I do really recommend you play more of these. There are so many to play. I'm not even saying, I don't even see like Godless Shrine here near the top. Maybe that's, I think that's because of my search, because technically Godless Shrine does not have tap text because it is a plains. And actually, is that true down here as well? Yeah, okay. So the ones that are missing are the ones that are swamps and plains, because a card that is a swamp or a plains and has the tap symbols is reminder text, because that's how magic works. Cool stuff. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so this is something that I really, really caught in your deck, and I didn't want to talk about it till now because I think it's really, really cool, and the kind of stuff that you should be thinking about at these power levels, especially when we're thinking about adjusting this deck to keep its identity, but give it a little extra oomph. And that is acknowledging an angle of attack you have access to that most decks don't. This is akin to, like, you know, having a white deck and noticing you get to play Rest in Peace, right? This is the kind of abilities, like, you need to be able to see this because it gives your deck like a huge bonus. Traditionally, the way you see this is go, oh, I can play Blood Moon, right? Is that you get that moment of, oh, I'm going to play this incredibly powerful card that my opponents won't be able to stop because I get to play it. Here, that version of this is the cards that stop enter the battlefield effects triggering. Now, ignore an Elish Norn there, she's just a victim of the search at the moment, but the rest of these, especially the creatures, Torpor Orb could also be ignored, but these 4 creatures are more than playable in your deck by a wide mark. We do have some ETB cards that I think, like, they still exist, but you're willing to take the Nombo because you get to have really good evasive creatures for these first 3 right here that really benefit from +1/+1 counters and are incredibly debilitating to our opponent's game plans, right? Now, the deck builder did mention that they didn't want too much stacks. I realize I'm going to scroll down while I talk, so the Hushwing Griff. They didn't want too much stacks. I'm going to leave it up to them to decide if this is considered stacks, and you can comment below if you feel that way. But cards that stop ETBs from happening are so powerful when you don't have many or at all any enter the battlefield effect, right? Like think of the number of creatures it just shuts down. Think of the commanders it shuts down. And once again, in the essence of how this deck works, these are all creatures that get to attack. And because they get to attack, that means they trigger Breena, and that means they replace themselves with the cards they draw, and you're generally happy. And Hushwing Gryff, which is like, I think the first one out of these that they printed as a creature that has this ability, gets like it's a 2/1, and then making it a 4/3 is just insane. Like it is a really powerful attacker really, really quickly, and because of the redundancy in the deck, you're pretty happy to be attacking with it. You don't mind it. 3 mana is not that much. That's not even including how Hushbringer shuts off aristocrats, or how Doorkeeper Thrall can shut off back decks. It's really, really cool. I know you don't have to, depending on the power level, but this is something I really want people to notice and keep an eye out. Okay, I have very quickly a number of 1 mana creatures that I think are worth playing. I don't want to belabor the point because I've said it a bunch of times, but the importance of curving out with Breena with a creature on 1, a creature on 2, attack with the creature on 1 to create an uneven life total amongst your opponents. Turn 3, play Breena, attack with 2 creatures at the players that have higher life, 2 Breena triggers, you're golden. Like, this is so essential for the deck. So I really, really want you to be playing more creatures and more 1 mana. And generally, I want those creatures to be evasive. I think that's straight. I don't think I need to explain that, why that's important. But there's a lot of choices. Flying is the one I was looking at, but there are creatures with 1 mana with menace, or other ways to get attacks in. I don't know if there's a 1 mana shadow creature, but that can be an option. Things to consider, and I wanted them to have some utility. And Fairy Dream Thief is a card that really catches my eye a lot. It has 2 really important abilities that, you know, we're not even using that card for generally. We're generally using this as a 1/1 flyer. But when this ETB surveils 1, that fixes your next draw, which is really nice. If you've ever played with surveil lands, you know how nice it is to occasionally have a surveil 1. And then when this is in your graveyard, you can pay it to just basically replace it later in the game with a card into your hand at instant speed, which is really cool. I think it is just a nice glue card for the deck that is really, really useful. Snarling Gorehound, I guess I did put 1 menace in, and I will note that this is an ETB card, which makes it a bit of a nombo with the other cards, but I still think it's worth playing. Snarling Gorehound is another surveil-based small creature, and because the majority of our deck is power 2 or less, it gives you so many incidental surveils. Our commander triggers it. There's so many little points that we're going to get of fixing our draws here and there. Also, Snarling Gorehound getting a few +1/+1 counters makes it into a pretty decent threat and a very good attacker. So I do think this is a very nice inclusion. I know these are both black so far, so let's look at the white one that I've added, and it's Segovian Angel. Segovian Angel is very, very funny, a very funny card if you know this plane and the jokes about it. But this is a really, really nice Breena target. You can really easily make it into her big sister, the Sarah Angel, or bigger, and you're going to be happy casting this turn 1 a lot. Going into card draw, like I said before, I wanted to add 1 more. Read the Bones I think fits perfect here, but if you wanted to play any of the other variants, Rowan's Grim Search and all that, I think that'll be great. I do like Read the Bones for how deep it looks, and when we don't have a lot of tokens to sacrifice, I don't tend to look at Rowan's Grim Search. Coming to kind of, I guess let's call this card draw as well. Moonlight Bargain is a card I just wanted to flag. It's funny, I said this deck is mainly not black, and I've added a bunch of black cards. It is the nature. This might be a bit of curse, you know, like my brain working the way I like building decks. So excuse me if I'm undoing a lot of work, but I did want to name some cards that I did think can give you some angles of attack. And Moonlight Bargain is just like a really powerful card draw engine for people who haven't played at it. That's very appropriate to this power level, where it's basically a draw. It's basically 5 mana, draw 5. Except for you don't pay 2 life for the cards you don't want. So it's a very powerful draw card. Excuse me. And it's a very powerful draw card, and it's very, very good at sometimes binning cards into the graveyard that you want. We don't have reanimation here, but if we did, it would work really well. It is a very, very good use of 5 mana, if you ask me. Speaking of 5 mana and win conditions, I did want to kind of use some of our defensive spells as a way to win the game. Like, we can establish a pretty good lock, but then we're still dependent on attacking to win. So I wanted like one card to put in here at least to kind of do that. And the reason I'm doing this is, if you see my deck and how I play it, is I try to use, for example, Shieldred, the flip Shieldred, into a way to win the game when the other main ways to win the game aren't working. It's like a single card that represents a win condition on it. And the closest analog I could find at this power level would be Painful Quandary. Painful Quandary is the kind of card that, you can't get attacks in, your opponents can't get attacks in, you drop Painful Quandary, and then you just, you are threatening to start knocking your opponents out, because now they can't cast spells, which buys you time to find your removal, get your attacks in. And if they are going to say, well, I'm gonna cast spells through it, they're going to be losing resources and then losing life really, really fast, which can be very effective. That card is particularly powerful paired with Lily of the Veil or Liliana, Waker of the Dead, but they're both also here because I think they're pretty good alternatives as well, in the same effort as a pretty good discard engine that turns into a win condition. Funnily enough, Liliana, Waker of the Dead is probably better at this power level than Liliana of the Veil. Without Dark Ritual and other effects, other stax effects or other discard effects, Liliana of the Veil definitely gets a little weaker. Her efficiency kind of runs out. But Waker of the Dead, I would say, is much stronger in that level, because that +1 is dealing damage, and then the other abilities, especially is very, very good. Without feeling like it's overpowering. I think that's going to be it. Oh yeah, I had one more. Last one is Dismember. I'd like to recommend this in decks that are playing black and have really do like that 1 mana removal. Dismember is that 1 mana removal in black that's on par with like Swords of Plowshares and like. So I mean, if you like the other ones, Dismember is the one to play after that. Yeah. And we're almost there. There we go. That's all my additions for the deck. I really like this. Obviously, I love Breena, but I do like this build, and I think I get a lot of questions of people who ask me, because my deck is at a higher bracket, is Breena playable or functional in lower brackets? And I would say yes, but it's nice to have an example standing here that shows that, yeah, absolutely, it works at lower power levels. And if you were even, willing to take out, because we have cards like Grand Abolisher here that might be tuned to higher power metas for most players, we can just take that out, right? Like, you can see just by seeing this deck of like how much we can slide that dial in either direction to increase or decrease power, while Breena just continues to be just a very, very strong commander. All right, I hope this video was helpful to you. Good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you, and good luck in brewing and building.